The pit lane at Silverstone Circuit. The roar of engines echoes across the track as the final practice session winds down for the British Grand Prix. The smell of burning rubber and high-octane fuel hangs in the air. In the garage, mechanics work frantically on a motorcycle that bears the scars of too many crashes, too many risks. The machine is a masterpiece of engineering and destruction. A Ducati Desmos DEGP, capable of reaching speeds that compress time into pure sensation. Carbon fiber fairings hide an engine that produces over 280 horsepower, channeled through a frame that weighs less than most bicycles. The rider sits nearby, pulling off his helmet to reveal a face that once graced movie screens, but now tells a different story. Gray hair, weathered skin, eyes that have seen more concrete rushing toward them at 200 miles per hour than any camera lens. Scars map his arms like a roadmap of choices made in split seconds at impossible speeds. His name is Keanu Reeves, and for the past 25 years, he has been proving to the world that some people choose reality over simulation, speed over safety, the honest risk of death over the comfortable illusion of immortality. The motorcycle in front of him has been rebuilt 17 times after crashes that should have been fatal. Like its rider, it bears the evidence of a life lived at the edge of possibility. Keanu's phone buzzes with a text from his physical therapist. Clinic tomorrow at 9 a.m. We need to discuss the MRI results. He deletes the message without reading it twice. He knows what the MRI shows, what every MRI for the past 15 years has shown. Damaged vertebrae, compressed nerves, joints that grind against each other like machinery that's been run too hard for too long. But tomorrow there's qualifying, and the day after that the race, and after that another track, another country, another chance to chase the only thing that has ever made him feel truly alive. 25 years ago, Keanu made a choice that changed everything. The Matrix, 1999. A script about reality versus illusion, about choosing the red pill or the blue pill, about discovering that everything you thought was real was just a computer simulation. The role of Neo was offered to him first before it went to Will Smith, before it became the defining science fiction film of a generation. The Wachowski sisters had seen something in Keanu that suggested he could embody the character's journey from ordinary programmer to digital messiah. This is more than just an action movie, Lana Wachowski told him during their first meeting. It's about questioning the nature of reality itself. It's about choosing truth over comfort, awakening over sleep. Neo's journey is about discovering that limitations are illusions. The script was ambitious, philosophical, unlike anything Hollywood was producing. But something about it felt fundamentally wrong to Keanu. Too removed from the physical world, too invested in the idea that reality was something to be escaped rather than embraced. Keanu read the script that night, surrounded by motorcycle magazines and racing videos. The story was intellectually fascinating, but the more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he became with its central premise. The Matrix suggested that the physical world was an illusion, that true freedom could only be found by rejecting material reality. I appreciate the offer, he told the Wachowskis the next week, but I don't think I'm the right actor for this role. Neo spends most of the movie sitting in chairs, plugged into computers, living in his head. The real action happens in a digital space that doesn't actually exist. I need something more physical, more real. But that's the point, Lily Wachowski replied. The physical world in the Matrix is an illusion. The real action happens in the mind, in the digital space where thoughts become reality. Maybe that's the problem, Keanu said. I don't want to tell people that the physical world doesn't matter. I don't want to suggest that their bodies are just prisons for their consciousness. I think the physical world is the only thing that's real. The Wachowskis tried to change his mind, explaining the deeper themes, the way it would challenge audiences to think about consciousness and free will. But Keanu had already made his decision, guided by an instinct he couldn't fully explain, but trusted completely. That weekend, he drove his motorcycle to the Angeles Crest Highway, the winding mountain road that had become his sanctuary whenever he needed to think. But instead of thinking, he rode fast, faster than was safe, faster than was smart, pushing his bike through curves that required perfect timing and absolute commitment. At 120 miles per hour, leaning into a turn that dropped away into nothing, Keanu felt something that no movie role had ever given him, the absolute certainty that this moment was real. The wind, the speed, the razor's edge between control and catastrophe. This was truth. This was life without safety nets, without special effects, without the possibility of multiple takes. That night he called his agent and told him to find professional motorcycle racing opportunities. Not as a hobby, not as training for movie roles, but as a career, as a thing he would do instead of acting. Keanu, you're an actor, his agent said, confusion evident in his voice. A successful actor with a growing reputation. Why would you throw that away for something so dangerous? Because danger is the only thing that feels honest, Keanu replied. Everything else is just pretending. The transition wasn't easy. Professional motorcycle racing required skills that acting had never developed, physical conditioning that pushed his body to its limits, mental focus that had nothing to do with memorizing lines, and a willingness to risk everything for the chance to go faster than anyone else. Keanu started in amateur circuits, racing against weekend warriors who had day jobs and families and sensible reasons for not pushing too hard. But sensibility was never Keanu's strength. He rode like someone who had nothing to lose, which attracted the attention of professional teams who were always looking for riders with more courage than sense. By 2002, Keanu was racing in the American Superbike Championship. By 2005, he had graduated to the World Superbike Championship. By 2010, he was competing in MotoGP, the Formula One of motorcycle racing, where the fastest riders in the world pushed the most advanced machines to speeds that existed at the very edge of what physics would allow. Meanwhile, The Matrix became a cultural phenomenon. Will Smith, who had taken the role after Keanu's rejection, became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. The film spawned sequels, video games, merchandise, and endless academic discussions about the nature of reality in the digital age. The irony was not lost on Keanu. While he was racing real motorcycles at real speeds with real consequences, Will Smith was earning hundreds of millions of dollars pretending to fight computer programs in a digital world that existed only on movie screens. Don't you ever regret it? A sports journalist asked him in 2010, after he'd won his first MotoGP championship at age 46. The Matrix made Will Smith one of the biggest stars in the world. You could have had that career. Keanu was sitting in his trailer after qualifying, ice packs strapped to both knees, painkillers coursing through his system to manage the chronic pain that had become his constant companion. His latest crash had left him with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a separated shoulder. But he'd still qualified third for the race. Will Smith made money pretending to be Neo, Keanu replied, wincing as he shifted position. I became something real instead. Which life would you choose? But the cost of becoming something real was written across his body in scars, breaks, and damage that accumulated with each passing year. By 2015, Keanu had crashed 17 times in professional races. Each crash was a reminder that the speed he craved came with consequences that no stunt coordinator could choreograph away. The worst crash came in 2018 at the Italian Grand Prix. Keanu was leading the race, pushing his Ducati through the high-speed corners of Mugello. He was 54 years old, an age when most riders had retired, but he was riding like a man half his age. The crash happened in the Casanova Savelli section. His rear tire lost grip at 180 miles per hour. The bike went down, sliding across the track in a shower of sparks, while Keanu's body tumbled through the air like a broken doll. He hit the concrete barrier with the force of a small car accident. He woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Milan, surrounded by machines monitoring his vital signs. The doctors explained his injuries with clinical detachment: 2 fractured vertebrae, a shattered left femur, traumatic brain injury requiring emergency surgery. You're lucky to be alive, the lead surgeon told him. Most riders don't survive crashes like that. The impact force was equivalent to falling off a 10-story building. You should consider retirement. Your spine cannot take another impact like this. But retirement was a concept that Keanu's mind couldn't process. Racing was not just what he did, it was who he was. Without racing, what was he? An actor who had walked away from acting. A man who had defined himself by rejecting safety in favor of authentic risk. The rehabilitation took 8 months. Physical therapy that felt like torture. Learning to walk again with titanium holding his spine together. His physical therapist pushed him harder than any director ever had, demanding that he relearn basic functions. You will never be the same, she told him bluntly. Your reaction time will be slower. Your flexibility limited. Your pain constant. You can have a normal life, but you cannot have the life you had before. 6 months later, against his doctor's advice, Keanu was back on the track. Slower than before, more cautious, but still pushing harder than riders half his age, who had never experienced the terror of waking up in a hospital, wondering if they would ever walk again. Now at age 60, Keanu is the oldest active rider in MotoGP. His body is a catalog of injuries that would have ended most racing careers decades ago: titanium plates in his spine, reconstructed joints, nerves that don't fire correctly, muscles that never fully recovered from trauma. He walks with a slight limp that's more pronounced in the mornings, has trouble turning his head fully to the right due to cervical vertebrae fusion, and requires a carefully managed cocktail of prescription painkillers to get through each race weekend. But when he's on the bike, when the engine is screaming beneath him, and the track is rushing toward him at speeds that compress time into pure sensation, none of the damage matters. In those moments suspended between control and catastrophe, Keanu is exactly who he chose to be: a man who picked reality over illusion, physical truth over digital fiction, the honest risk of death over the comfortable safety of pretending. The younger riders respect him with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. They call him the Ghost because he seems to appear and disappear on the track like someone who exists between worlds, someone who understands secrets about speed that they're still learning. They've grown up watching the Matrix films, marveling at the action sequences that redefine what was possible in science fiction cinema. But they have no idea that the man they race against every weekend was offered the chance to star in those films and walked away. "Why do you still do this?" a 25-year-old rider asked him once, after watching Keanu limp away from his bike following a particularly brutal qualifying session. "You've already proved everything you need to prove. You've won championships, broken records, survived crashes that killed other riders. What's left to accomplish?" Keanu had considered the question while ice packs numbed the latest injuries, while painkillers temporarily quieted the constant ache that had become the soundtrack to his daily existence. What was left to accomplish? What drove a 60-year-old man to continue risking everything for a few more seconds of perfect speed? "It's not about accomplishment," he finally replied. "It's about authenticity. Every time I get on that bike, I'm making a choice to live in the real world instead of hiding from it. Every corner I take at speed is a moment when I can't pretend, can't act, can't be anything other than completely present. That's worth more than any championship." The young rider had looked confused, perhaps unable to understand why someone would choose pain over comfort, risk over safety, the possibility of death over the guarantee of a long, easy retirement. But Keanu had stopped trying to explain his choices to people who hadn't made similar ones. After each race, Keanu returns to a hotel room that looks like a mobile medical clinic. Ice baths to reduce inflammation, heating pads for chronic muscle tension, physical therapy equipment to maintain what mobility he has left, medications that help him manage the constant pain that has become as much a part of his identity as his love of speed. He sleeps poorly, wakes up stiff, and spends the first hour of each day convincing his body to move normally enough to function. But he also wakes up knowing that he chose correctly, that while Will Smith earned billions playing Neo in a digital world that existed only on movie screens, Keanu became something more valuable, a man who never had to wonder if his life was real. The Matrix films became cultural touchstones for discussions about consciousness, reality, and free will. Philosophy professors used them to explore questions about the nature of existence. Fans debated whether taking the red pill was worth the pain of awakening. Critics analyzed them as metaphors for everything from religious awakening to political revolution. Keanu never saw them, not because he was bitter about the choice he'd made, but because he was too busy living the answer to the questions the films asked. Every time he leaned into a corner at 150 miles per hour, every time he felt the bike respond to his slightest movement, every time he pushed beyond the limits of what seemed possible, he was taking the red pill. The difference was that his Matrix wasn't a computer simulation. It was the illusion that safety and comfort and a long, easy life were more valuable than the brief, intense experience of being completely alive. It was the lie that physical reality was less important than digital fantasy, that the body was just a vehicle for consciousness rather than consciousness itself. At 200 miles per hour, leaning into a corner that exists at the very edge of what physics allows, there are no illusions, no comfortable lies, no digital safety nets, no possibility that what you're experiencing is anything other than completely, authentically, dangerously real. The asphalt is real. The speed is real. The possibility of death is real. And for Keanu Reeves, that reality, painful, dangerous, and absolutely authentic, was worth more than all the digital immortality in the world. Tonight, after qualifying, Keanu will return to his hotel room and prepare for tomorrow's race. He'll review telemetry data, study video of his lap times, work with his crew to fine-tune the bike setup, but mostly, he'll sit quietly and remember why he chose this life. 25 years ago, he was offered the chance to play a character who discovered that the physical world was an illusion. Instead, Keanu chose to live in a world where everything physical was absolutely, undeniably, dangerously real. Where speed is not a special effect, but a force that can kill you if you're not perfect. Where crashes are not choreographed by stunt coordinators, but determined by physics, reflexes, and luck. Where the only simulation is the one other people live in when they choose safety over truth. At 200 miles per hour, there are no illusions, no comfortable lies, no digital safety nets, no possibility that what you're experiencing is anything other than completely real. And for Keanu Reeves, that reality, dangerous, painful, and absolutely authentic, was worth more than all the digital immortality in the world. The track lights illuminate the empty circuit like a stage waiting for tomorrow's performance. In a few hours, 22 riders will push themselves and their machines to the absolute limit, chasing victory at speeds that exist at the edge of human possibility. One of those riders will be a 60-year-old man whose body bears the evidence of every choice he's made, every crash he's survived, every moment when he chose to lean a little deeper into the turn instead of backing off. He chose the red pill, but his version led not to digital awakening, but to the simple, profound truth that the physical world is the only world that matters, and that some forms of reality are worth dying for.